Picture this: millions of people following a holy book that simply vanished from history. What if I told you there was once a massive community of believers who followed the Zabur, also known as the Psalms of David? These weren't just a small group of people. We're talking about entire civilizations that built their faith around this sacred text. But here's the mysterious part. Where did they all go? Today, we're going to explore one of history's most fascinating religious mysteries. The Zabur was mentioned in the Qur'an as one of the 4 major holy books revealed by God. Yet, unlike Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, there's no clear community today that claims to follow the Zabur as their primary scripture. This raises some incredible questions about religious history, cultural transformation, and what happens when entire belief systems evolve over time. We'll trace the journey of these believers through ancient history. We'll discover how their practices merged with other religions, and we'll find out where their descendants might be living today.
This story will take us across continents and through thousands of years of human history. So grab a cup of coffee and let's solve this ancient mystery together. Let me start by explaining what the Zabur actually was. The Zabur, which comes from the Arabic word meaning written or book, refers to the Psalms revealed to Prophet David. In Islamic tradition, it's considered one of the 4 major revealed books, alongside the Torah, the Gospel, and the Qur'an. The Zabur contained hymns, prayers, and spiritual guidance that David used to lead his people. These weren't just songs or poems. According to historical accounts, they were divine revelations meant to guide an entire community of believers. Now here's where things get interesting. The original followers of the Zabur lived in ancient Israel and the surrounding regions around 1000 BCE. King David ruled over a united kingdom that included modern-day Israel, Palestine, and parts of Jordan and Syria. His followers weren't just politically loyal to him, they were spiritually connected to the teachings and psalms he received. These early believers developed their own religious practices based on the Zabur. They held special prayer sessions where they would recite David's psalms. They created musical instruments specifically for worship, as David himself was known for his musical abilities. Archaeological evidence shows us that they built unique places of worship that were different from later Jewish temples. But here's the first major turning point in our story. After David's death, his son Solomon took over the kingdom. Solomon built the famous temple in Jerusalem and introduced new religious practices. Many of the original Zabur followers began to incorporate these new traditions into their faith. Over time, their distinct identity as Zabur believers started to blend with what we now call Judaism. This process didn't happen overnight. It took several generations for this religious transformation to complete. Think of it like how different Christian denominations developed over time. The core beliefs remained similar, but the practices and emphasis changed significantly. The second major shift happened during the Babylonian exile around 586 BCE, when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and took many people into captivity. Religious practices had to adapt to survive. The exiled communities couldn't maintain their temple-based worship. They had to find new ways to preserve their faith and traditions. During this period, many Zabur-specific practices were either lost or absorbed into broader Jewish traditions. The oral traditions that had been passed down for generations were written down and compiled with other texts. This is when we see the Psalms becoming part of the larger Hebrew Bible, rather than standing alone as the Zabur. Now let's talk about what happened in different parts of the world. Some Zabur believers had already spread beyond the original kingdom before these major changes occurred. Trade routes carried these communities to places like Yemen, Ethiopia, and even parts of India. In Yemen, there's fascinating evidence of communities that maintained David-focused worship practices well into the early centuries CE. These Yemeni communities developed their own interpretations of the Zabur teachings. They created unique artistic traditions, including special calligraphy for writing the Psalms. Their architecture included specific design elements meant to honor King David. Some historians believe these communities existed independently until the arrival of Islam in the 7th century. In Ethiopia, we find another interesting branch of Zabur believers. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition has always placed special emphasis on the Psalms of David. While they're officially Christian, many of their practices seem to preserve elements that might trace back to original Zabur traditions. Ethiopian churches dedicate specific times for psalm recitation that are different from other Christian denominations. They use musical instruments and melodies that scholars believe might be similar to ancient Davidic worship. The Ethiopian Jewish community, known as Beta Israel, also maintain traditions that some researchers connect to ancient Zabur practices. Moving to the Indian subcontinent, we find traces of communities that might have been influenced by Zabur believers. In ancient texts from the Kashmir region, there are references to people who followed Dawud's book. Dawud is the Arabic and Persian name for David. These communities apparently maintained their distinct identity until around the 10th century CE. Some merged with local Hindu traditions, while others converted to Islam when it arrived in the region. Interestingly, certain Sufi traditions in the area still use psalms and hymns that bear remarkable similarity to the original Zabur texts. Now, here's where the story gets really complex. When Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, many former Zabur believers found the new religion appealing. After all, Christians also revered David and used his psalms in their worship. The transition from Zabur-focused faith to Christianity was relatively smooth for many communities. This is why we see the Psalms holding such a central place in Christian liturgy even today. Many early Christian communities, especially in the Middle East and North Africa, were likely composed of people whose ancestors had followed the Zabur. Similarly, when Islam spread across these same regions, the transition was often natural for remaining Zabur believers. The Qur'an explicitly mentions and honors the Zabur as a revealed book. Muslims are required to believe in all previous scriptures, including the Zabur. This made conversion to Islam feel like a continuation of their faith, rather than a complete change. Many Islamic traditions around the world still show evidence of ancient Zabur influences. The emphasis on beautiful recitation, the use of specific musical modes for religious texts, and the special reverence shown to David all trace back to these earlier traditions. So where are the descendants of Zabur believers today? The answer is both everywhere and nowhere. They're everywhere because their spiritual DNA lives on in multiple religious traditions. They're nowhere because there's no distinct community that identifies specifically as Zabur followers. In modern Israel and Palestine, both Jewish and Christian communities maintain practices that likely originated with ancient Zabur believers. The Western Wall in Jerusalem, where people go to pray using David's Psalms, represents a direct connection to those original traditions. Ethiopian Orthodox Christians continue to use worship styles that may preserve ancient Zabur elements. Their famous rock churches were designed with acoustics specifically for psalm singing. Certain Sufi orders across the Muslim world, particularly in Turkey, Iran, and Central Asia, use mystical practices that scholars trace back to Davidic traditions. These include specific breathing techniques during prayer and the use of certain musical instruments. Certain Kurdish communities have maintained oral traditions about being descendants of people who followed the Book of Songs, which many researchers believe refers to the Zabur. In India, some communities in Kashmir and the surrounding regions still tell stories about their ancestors following David's teachings. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. The entire tradition of using music in worship, which we see across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, likely traces back to these original followers of David's Psalms. The concept of using poetry and song to connect with the divine became a foundational element in multiple world religions.
Even secular music traditions in many cultures show influences that can be traced back to ancient psalm singing practices. The call and response patterns we hear in gospel music, the melodic structures used in Islamic Quranic recitation, and the chanting traditions in Jewish synagogues all share common roots. This suggests that while the Zabur believers may not exist as a distinct community today, their spiritual and cultural contributions live on in ways that affect billions of people. Modern archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new information about these ancient communities. Excavations in Israel, Jordan, and Syria have uncovered worship sites that appear to be specifically designed for the type of musical worship associated with the Zabur. These sites are different from typical ancient temples because they include special acoustic features and spaces for musical instruments. Recent discoveries in Yemen have revealed manuscripts that contain psalm-like texts written in ancient Hebrew and Arabic. These texts appear to be different versions of some psalms we know today, suggesting that Zabur believers maintained their own textual traditions for centuries. DNA studies of various Middle Eastern and North African populations have also provided interesting insights. While we can't identify specific religious beliefs through genetics, we can trace population movements and cultural connections. These studies show that many communities across the region share common ancestors who lived during the time when Zabur believers would have been most active. This supports the theory that these believers spread widely and integrated into various populations over time.
So what happened to the believers of the Zabur? They didn't disappear, they transformed and integrated into the broader tapestry of human religious experience. Their legacy lives on in the millions of people who sing psalms in churches, synagogues, and mosques around the world. It continues in the musical traditions that bring people closer to the divine. And it persists in the archaeological sites and ancient manuscripts that scholars are still discovering today. The story of the Zabur believers teaches us something important about how religions evolve and influence each other over time. Rather than simply vanishing, their traditions became part of the foundation for multiple faith communities that exist today. Their descendants are the Ethiopian Christians chanting in ancient rock churches, the Yemeni Muslims who preserve old musical traditions, the Jewish communities who make the Psalms central to their worship, and countless others who carry forward pieces of this ancient spiritual heritage. What do you think about this fascinating journey through religious history? Have you ever encountered traditions in your own community that might trace back to these ancient practices? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this exploration of religious history interesting, hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the mysteries of the past. And if you know someone who would enjoy learning about this topic, please share this video with them. The story of the Zabur believers reminds us that nothing in history truly disappears. It just transforms and continues in new ways.